June 17, 1876, Rosebud Creek, Montana Territory. A cold dawn breaks over the South Fork of the creek, where Major General George Crook's column of approximately 1,000 United States soldiers, bolstered by Crow and Shoshone scouts, halts after days of grueling marches. The Great Sioux War rages, pitting the United States Army against Lakota and Northern Cheyenne, and Allied warriors determined to protect their homelands. The core metric, a 6-hour running battle, looms one that will echo in Cheyenne memory, not for generals or tactics, but for a singular act of courage by a woman who turned back for her brother. The scene unfolds with visceral clarity. Exhausted soldiers stir beside dying campfires, their breath visible in the morning chill. Mule lines creak, harnesses jingle, and the faint scent of buffalo lingers on the breeze. Distant thunder rolls, but it is not a storm, it is the pounding of hooves. Crow scouts perched on the bluffs above suddenly fire their rifles, their shouts slicing through the camp's lethargy. Two riders gallop into Crook's column, their warning clear. Lakota and Northern Cheyenne warriors are descending. The column halted in marching order, without defensive entrenchments braces, for an unexpected fight. Crook's men sense they have stumbled into something vast, something they did not anticipate. Across the ridges, the perspective shifts to the approaching warriors. Lakota and Northern Cheyenne, led by the battle-hardened Crazy Horse, have ridden through the night from their great village on the upper tributaries. Their force roughly 1,000 strong fans out along the high ground, their movements deliberate, not haphazard. Among them rides a Northern Cheyenne woman, her presence unremarkable to her people, but striking to the United States soldiers' expectations. She has not yet named her silhouette, a quiet promise of the story to come. This is no ordinary clash of armies. It is a collision of campaigns, cultures, and memories, where the victors will not agree on what to call the day. The question that will drive this narrative emerges. United States reports will label this the Battle of the Rosebud, a tactical engagement in a broader war. But why do the Northern Cheyenne call it the battle where the girl saved her brother? What unfolded on this broken ground to etch that name into their history? The answer lies not in official dispatches, but in the oral traditions and lived experiences of a people fighting for their way of life. United States reports will label this the Battle of the Rosebud, a tactical engagement in a broader war. But why do the Northern Cheyenne call it the battle where the girl saved her brother? What unfolded on this broken ground to etch that name into their history? The answer lies not in official dispatches, but in the oral traditions and lived experiences of a people fighting for their way of life. To understand the clash at Rosebud Creek, one must first trace the deeper currents that drew these forces together. The roots of this conflict lie in broken promises, contested lands, and the collision of two worlds with irreconcilable visions of the future. In 1868, the Treaty of Fort Laramie promised the Lakota their Northern Cheyenne allies and other signatories sovereignty over the Black Hills and vast unceded hunting grounds in the Powder River country. Non-indigenous settlers were barred from entering without permission. For the Lakota and Cheyenne, these lands were not merely territory, but the heart of their way of life. Home to their lodges, hunting grounds, and sacred sites. The treaty's ink was barely dry when it began to unravel. In 1874, gold was discovered in the Black Hills, sparking a rush of unauthorized miners. The United States attempted to purchase the hills, but the Lakota and Cheyenne refused to sell what they considered inalienable. Frustrated, Washington issued an ultimatum: all bands must report to government agencies by January 31, 1876, or be declared hostile. Many Lakota and Northern Cheyenne, hunting or wintering far from the agencies, either did not receive the order or chose to defy it. Their refusal set the stage for the Great Sioux War with Rosebud as one of its pivotal moments. From the United States perspective, the 1876 campaign was a calculated effort to enforce compliance. 3 columns converged on the Bighorn and Powder River country, one under General John Gibbon from the west, another under General Alfred Terry, including George Custer's 7th Cavalry from the east, and the third under Major General George Crook, advancing north from Fort Fetterman along the old Bozeman Trail. Crook's force, numbering about 1,000 soldiers plus civilian packers and teamsters, aimed to locate and strike large indigenous camps. A seasoned commander, Crook leaned heavily on indigenous allies. Crow and Shoshone scouts, traditional enemies of the Lakota and Cheyenne, who joined him to curb their rivals' power. These scouts were not mere guides. They were skilled fighters integral to Crook's strategy. For the Lakota and Northern Cheyenne, the stakes at Rosebud transcended a single battle. Their great village camped along the upper tributaries of the Rosebud and Little Bighorn rivers, sheltered families, elders, and children, the physical and cultural core of their communities. To allow Crook's column to reach this village was to risk not just warriors' lives, but the survival of their people. Crazy Horse, a Lakota leader, renowned for his tactical acumen, emerged as a central figure in the effort to stop Crook before he could link with other United States forces. Unlike the hierarchical command of the United States Army, Lakota and Cheyenne, warfare relied on consensus and individual initiative, with leaders like Crazy Horse inspiring rather than ordering. Within this indigenous context, the presence of women in war parties, though rare in United States accounts, was not unusual. Northern Cheyenne oral histories, as recorded by John Stans and Timber, note, women who rode alongside warriors, sometimes fighting or supporting their kin. This sets the stage for Buffalo Calf Road Woman, a Northern Cheyenne woman whose actions at Rosebud would define the battle in her people's memory. Far from a mythical figure, she was a historical actor, her role grounded in documented accounts. The stage is now set for the collision Crook's disciplined but weary column, bolstered by Crow and Shoshone allies, against a determined indigenous force fighting to protect their homeland. Crook's disciplined but weary column, bolstered by Crow and Shoshone allies, against a determined indigenous force fighting to protect their homeland. As June 17, 1876, approached the paths of Major General George Crook's column and the Lakota and Northern Cheyenne, warriors converged with deliberate intent. Crook's force, advancing north from Fort Fetterman, reached the Tongue River area in early June. Here, Lakota and Northern Cheyenne warriors tested his camp with long-range fire, signaling they were tracking his movements. Undeterred, Crook pressed forward, his column reinforced by approximately 200 Crow and Shoshone scouts by mid-June. These scouts, seasoned in the region's terrain and warfare, warned Crook that his enemies were numerous and resolute. Yet with orders to strike indigenous camps, Crook continued toward the headwaters of Rosebud Creek. On June 16, Crook made a critical decision. To move swiftly, he left his wagons and much of his supplies behind, transforming his column into a lean, striking force. Carrying several days of rations and ammunition, his men, elements of the 2nd and 3rd United States Cavalry and 4th and 9th United States Infantry, pushed through rugged country. The soldiers were tired, their animals worn, but Crook believed speed would give him the advantage. His goal was clear, find, and engage the large Lakota and Cheyenne village he suspected lay in the Rosebud or Little Bighorn drainages. Parallel to Crook's advance, the indigenous response took shape with equal purpose. From their great village on the upper tributaries, roughly 1,000 Lakota Northern Cheyenne and a smaller number of Northern Arapaho warriors prepared to intercept the United States column. This was no chance encounter. Guided by scouts and driven by the need to protect their families, the warriors left their lodges under cover of darkness on June 16. They rode through the night, navigating familiar ridges and ravines, their movements coordinated but flexible, as was their custom. Among them were siblings, Buffalo Calf Road Woman, and Comes in Sight. Northern Cheyenne riders whose presence reflected the community's collective resolve. Their journey was not a reaction, but a calculated strike to halt Crook before he could threaten their people. Dawn on June 17 found Crook's column halted near the South Fork of Rosebud Creek. The men dismounted, animals grazed, and no entrenchments were dug, a sign of their exhaustion and Crook's expectation of a brief rest. High above, Crow and Shoshone scouts patrolled the ridges, their eyes scanning the horizon. Suddenly, shots rang out. The scouts had sighted the approaching Lakota and Cheyenne, their silhouettes cresting the hills. The battle began not with a single charge, but with a ripple of gunfire that shattered the morning's quiet. Crook reacted swiftly, ordering companies from the 2nd and 3rd Cavalry and 4th and 9th Infantry to seize the high ground before the warriors could envelop his position. The terrain, broken ridges, ravines, and sagebrush fragmented the fight from its outset. On the indigenous side, Crazy Horse and other leaders orchestrated mounted attacks, striking and withdrawing across a front several miles wide. Their strategy was to disrupt Crook's cohesion, pulling his units apart and preventing a unified defense. Dust and smoke rose, obscuring visibility, as the battle spread into a chaotic tapestry of charges and countercharges. Two key axes of the fight emerged. Captain Anson Mills, leading portions of the 3rd Cavalry, drove mounted charges to reclaim ridges, but risked overextending his men. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Colonel William B. Royal pushed aggressively against warriors on another ridge, his detachment dangerously isolated. The Crow and Shoshone scouts proved indispensable blunting attacks that threatened to overrun Crook's camp, and buying time for his fraying lines to regroup. For 6 hours, the battle surged across the Rosebud's rugged landscape, neither side yielding decisively each moment, building toward a singular act that would define the day in Cheyenne memory. For 6 hours, the battle surged across the Rosebud's rugged landscape, neither side yielding decisively each moment, building toward a singular act that would define the day in Cheyenne memory. By late morning on June 17, 1876, the Battle of the Rosebud had fractured into a sprawling contest along the ridges and ravines of Montana Territory. Major General George Crook's column, though holding its core position, struggled to maintain control over a field obscured by dust and gunfire. Lakota and Northern Cheyenne warriors, under leaders like Crazy Horse, pressed their advantage with relentless mounted attacks, their persistence defying the United States Army's expectations of plains warfare. Amid this chaos, a single moment crystallized, etching the battle into Northern Cheyenne memory not as a clash of armies, but as the battle where the girl saved her brother. The lens narrows to a critical sector where Captain Anson Mills's 3rd Cavalry charged against Lakota and Northern Cheyenne warriors on a contested ridge. Dust choked the air, and the crack of rifles blended with the shouts of men and the screams of horses. In the heart of this melee comes in sight a Northern Cheyenne warrior faced disaster. His horse was shot out from under him, leaving him stranded on foot as United States cavalry bore down. Exposed with little cover and United States troopers closing in, his situation was dire. Warriors wheeled and fired around him, but the tide of battle offered no pause. Then, defying the chaos, his sister Buffalo Calf Road Woman made a choice that would define the day. Riding among the warriors, she saw her brother's plight and turned her horse back toward the danger. Galloping through a hail of bullets, she reached Comes in sight. He mounted behind her, clinging to her as she spurred her horse toward safety. United States fire pursued them, but their escape succeeded a fleeting triumph amid the battle's relentless violence. This act, witnessed by Cheyenne and Lakota fighters, was no mere anecdote. It became the anchor of the battle's name in Northern Cheyenne oral tradition, a story preserved in ledger art, and recounted by descendants as documented by historians like John Stans in Timber. The rescue was not the battle's only turning point. Tactically, Crook's forces achieved partial success by midday, holding key ridges, but failing to scatter their opponents. Lieutenant Colonel William B. Royal's wing, however, remained under severe pressure, nearly cut off by warriors exploiting the broken terrain. Crow and Shoshone scouts, with their intimate knowledge of the land, launched countercharges that stabilized Royal's position, preventing a collapse. The Lakota and Cheyenne, for their part, demonstrated extraordinary resolve, re-engaging repeatedly rather than dispersing as United States commanders often anticipated. Yet, they could not overrun Crook's core camp, where disciplined infantry fire held firm. As the sun climbed higher, the battle reached its peak. Mills attempted another maneuver, but the indigenous force, sensing the fight's momentum shifting, began to disengage. By early afternoon, the warriors withdrew, melting into the ridges from which they had come. The battle ended without a cinematic flourish, no final charge or decisive rout. Crook's men held the field, but their victory was hollow. Exhausted, low on supplies, and uncertain of the enemy's strength, Crook faced a sobering reality. The emotional weight of the climax lies in its dual perspectives. United States reports, as recorded by John Gregory Burke, framed the day in terms of ridges seized and casualties tallied. Approximately 28 soldiers killed or wounded, with indigenous losses estimated similarly but less precisely. Crook claimed a tactical success, yet his column would not advance further. In stark contrast, Northern Cheyenne memory centered on Buffalo Calf Road Woman's courage. Her ride into danger to save her brother became the battle's defining image, a testament to kinship and bravery that transcended military outcomes. The question now looms: how does the same battle carry such different names and meanings? And what does this reveal about whose stories endure? The emotional weight of the climax lies in its dual perspectives. United States reports as recorded by John Gregory Bourke, where framed the day in terms of ridges seized, and casualties tallied approximately 28 soldiers killed or wounded, with indigenous losses estimated similarly, but less precisely. Crook claimed a tactical success, yet his column would not advance further. In stark contrast, Northern Cheyenne memory centered on Buffalo Calf Road woman's courage. Her ride into danger to save her brother became the battle's defining image, a testament to kinship and bravery that transcended military outcomes. The question now looms: how does the Somme battle carry such different names and meanings? And what does this reveal about whose stories endure as the dust settled on June 17, 1876? The immediate consequences of the Battle of the Rosebud reshaped the Great Sioux War's trajectory. Major General George Crook's column, though technically in possession of the battlefield, was battered. Casualties concentrated heavily, and Lieutenant Colonel William B. Royal's exposed wing numbered dozens, killed and wounded. Crook's supplies dwindled, his animals were exhausted, and the size and location of the main Lakota and Northern Cheyenne village remained uncertain. Faced with these realities, Crook made a pivotal choice. He withdrew south to Goose Creek, where his column encamped for weeks, awaiting reinforcements, rather than pressing toward the Little Bighorn or linking with other United States forces. This retreat marked Rosebud as a strategic setback for the United States, halting one arm of their three-column campaign. For the Lakota and Northern Cheyenne, the battle was a triumph, though not without cost. Their losses, though less documented, were likely comparable to Crook's, with warriors falling in the prolonged fight. Yet their objective was achieved. Crook's advance was stopped, shielding their great village and its families from immediate threat. From their perspective, Rosebud was not an isolated engagement, but part of a broader season of resistance, a defensive stand to preserve their way of life. Crazy Horse and other leaders returned to their people, their resolve strengthened for the fights to come. 8 days later, on June 25, 1876, the Battle of the Little Bighorn unfolded, where many of the same Lakota and Northern Cheyenne warriors, including Buffalo Calf Road woman, according to Cheyenne accounts, faced George Custer's 7th Cavalry. Custer's defeat, a seismic event in United States history, overshadowed Rosebud in popular memory. Yet Rosebud's impact was direct. Crook's absence from the Little Bighorn Theater, a consequence of his withdrawal, left Terry and Custer without his support. For the indigenous coalition, Rosebud and Little Bighorn were not separate, but linked chapters in their defense of their homeland. The battle's legacy, however, lies as much in its naming as in its military outcomes. In United States military records and most academic histories, the engagement is cataloged as the Battle of the Rosebud, or Rosebud Creek, a prelude to Little Bighorn defined by tactical metrics. In Northern Cheyenne oral tradition, it is the battle where the girl saved her brother, a name rooted in Buffalo Calf Road woman's act of courage. This title, preserved in stories, ledger art, and later written accounts, reflects a worldview that prioritizes human bonds over strategic abstractions. Over time, the Cheyenne name gained wider recognition, appearing in modern histories and at Rosebud Battlefield State Park, where signage now acknowledges the story of Buffalo Calf Road woman. The persistence of this name challenges the power of official narratives. For the Northern Cheyenne Buffalo Calf Road, woman's decision to ride back for comes in sight embodies courage, kinship, and the vital role of women in their community's survival. For historians of the Great Sioux War, Rosebud is increasingly seen not as a minor skirmish, but as a major indigenous victory that altered the campaign's course. The contrast between these perspectives invites reflection: who decides a battle's name and whose story is centered? A single woman's act in a moment of crisis became the lens through which her people defined an entire engagement, a testament to the enduring power of indigenous memory. This history calls for reconsideration. The battle where the girl saved her brother is not merely an alternative title, but a claim to truth, now rooted in the lived experience of those who fought and survived. Viewers are invited to ask which name better captures the essence of June 17, 1876. Are there other battles where indigenous or community names reveal hidden stories, learning, and using these names saying, Battle where the girl saved her brother alongside Rosebud, honors the people whose homelands became battlefields. It is a small but meaningful act of respect, a way to ensure that Buffalo Calf Road Women's Ride and the courage it represents is not forgotten.